Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdouble-bass.com, which is the home of online learning for the double bass. So if you want to take your bass playing further, please go and check out our lessons and courses. In today's video, we're continuing with a new series where we ask the world's greatest double bass players a whole range of questions. These are classical experts today, and we're asking them this question. Who did you study with, and can you share something they taught you which made a big impact on your development?
The teacher that had the biggest effect on me, or the most profound effect, has to be the great Italian maestro Franco Petracchi. And for sort of non-verbal reasons, the first night I arrived in Rome in 1975, I'll never forget it. He took out his bass and played, and I'd never heard anything as extraordinary, as huge, as expressive, as powerful. And to say that I was floored would be an understatement. I still can hear that sound. I've modeled everything I do, I think, after that, trying to get near that sound. So, right there, great lesson right there. But technically too, he did something that was very funny. In my era back then, I think a lot of us were being taught to play with the left hand really at right angles in thumb position to the string, actually back here too. Keep a nice spread like this and really right angle like that. Which, by the way, I hate. For one thing, this right angle like this, it's really only good if you want your vibrato to sound like that. At any rate, Maestro Petracchi, he took one look at me, one look at what I was doing, and he goes, la técnica, terrible, it's terrible. And he came over and, he grabbed my hand like that. And I went, huh? What? I'm gonna play like that? These aren't even close to the string roll. No, not like that. At any rate, yes, because it's the first time that for one thing, I could do vibrato with my first finger, because I'm actually... Same back here. At any rate, that was the first time it gave me independence of my thumb. I could use it anywhere then. I could get the vibrato going, and it just, the technique changed everything. So, mille grazie, maestro.
I studied first with Günter Klaus in Frankfurt in Germany, and then in Switzerland, in Geneva, with Franco Petracchi. And I also went to different master classes. So the difference of the teachers was very interesting for me. So with my teacher Günter Klaus, I learned a lot of this basic feeling to the instrument. Very natural, very profound, very easy, yeah, very direct. So like one body, yeah. And yeah, then I entered in the orchestra, in the Cologne Radio Symphony, and yeah, great time. And later I started to study with Franco Petracchi when I wanted to improve a bit more my solistic playing. I was, I always did a lot of solistic things, and I had this Frankfurter double bass quartet. I was very interested to see the different colors of the bass, not only orchestra, also chamber music and solistic. And yeah, I started to intense a bit more with another teacher, a bit more than only master classes. So I did several master classes with Klaus Stoll, by the way. And and I started with Franco Petracchi, who was the bel canto singer of the double bass, and who really taught a very good focused sound. So of course we know the sound is very different if you play in orchestra. String just should have to play easily, don't stress the string, yeah, so just sound. And in Germany you have the walky big sound. And that's different with the solo playing, especially because the double bass is not the super loudest instrument. So we have to take care to have a really good focused sound in the hall. And this means the playing also very near on the bridge. And that's the total contrast of playing in the orchestra. And with Franco I learned this sound production, which is really astonishing. If you play here or if you play there, it's very different. So, but in orchestra, never go there. So, and I like this, that player really like 3 different instruments. Also the chamber music is something in the middle, it depends of the piece, of course. And the big phrasing and all this Bottesini works I learned from Franco and of course also Nino Rota and so. But the orchestra sound from Günter Klaus, it's world best. So I really like it. So I enjoy always playing orchestra, and it's this profound easiness and a bit sportive character, which I really adore.
I had a few teachers during my student years. I started the double bass at 9 years old with my father, who is also a bass player. I then studied at the Central Conservatory Middle School in Beijing before going to the United States. In the US, I went to Interlochen Arts Academy, studied with Dirk Wahler before getting my artist diploma at the Indiana University, studying with Lawrence Hurst. I met Lawrence Hurst when I was 10 years old. He came to China to give master classes, and I had a chance to play for him that time. And I always wanted to go to Indiana University ever since. Most of my foundation were built in China with my father. He made sure I practiced scales, arpeggios, and etudes. And I practiced every day. China that time had very limited resources, and internet was not a thing yet. So when I went to the United States, I got opportunity to see a lot more, and my mind was being opened. The possibilities on the double bass is unlimited, but not everything is worth spending time on and getting good results. During my studies with Lawrence Hurst, I learned a great deal of making logical choices of repertoire for solo playing, developing musical taste, stage manner, and personality. He encouraged me to play competitions and helped me to get ready for them. and those were important years for me to tackle challenges as a professional solo player on stage.
My first teacher was Jean Baquet. He's co-soloist of Orchestre National de France. And I started double bass with him when I was 5 years old. And after that I started violin. So I had a lot of teachers, I have some teachers. In double bass I had Jean Baquet for 14 years, and after that I was in Thierry Barbet's class, and after I worked with Petro Yoga, so I had 3 teachers in double bass and 3 teachers in violin, and all of them was I'm very grateful for all of them, because it could seem basic, but they always encourage me to play my both instruments, and to not I never had the feeling that I had to choose between one of my instruments. They always say me that it was my my strong my strongness, I don't know, just to have 2 instruments and to be inspired about both or by both, and with this kind of thinking, I was always open-minded with, of course, the instruments, but also with style of music, because I think that it's really good to listen a lot of music, and to be inspired from a lot of musicians. And especially in this period, we have time for that, but I'm trying to listen a lot of musicians and a lot of styles, to understand what I can improve in my playing, and I'm really grateful for my teacher for that. I think that's the principle, the main thing I learned, but also, of course, I have a lot of interesting points, like I have really good memory of my first teacher, who, when I was 5, we played like duets with the voice of students and voice of teacher, and he said me, look, if we breathe together, we will play together, and I learned that the importance of the breath, and to breathe out, to breathe in, and all the music started here, and yeah, that's one of interesting thing I learned.
I have had only 2 teachers for double bass, which is a very fortunate thing for myself. It wasn't confusing me a lot. And my first teacher, his name is Tihomir Vidovic. He taught me in Sarajevo, where I lived as a child. And he was a marvelous motivator, I could say. He motivated me so much and inspired. I've begun to like double bass, although back then, when I was 13 or 14, my dream was to become a professional rock guitar player, which is quite different than what I I have chosen later with a classical double bass. And this first teacher was capable also, he knew exactly how to do it, how to show. He had a fantastic and very, very correct way of the technique, left hand and the bow technique. Yes, back then I was playing so-called French bow style, which I could still do very well because one simply never forgets it, just like bicycle riding. And when I went to my second teacher, Jiří Hudec, who was a professor at the Music Academy in Prague, I didn't need to do any technical corrections anymore. Jiří was a marvelous player and well known back then, and he just said it's excellent. And he taught me basically just how to hold this bow style. Most of people call it German, but it is actually, I don't want to open discussion, it's not really German what most of people play today. It is rather a Bohemian bow, which has its origin at the conservatory in Prague, and it was popularized and most known due to Franz Simandel's method. And František Simandl, who was also Czech, was also a pupil, a student of the conservatory in Prague. And it takes, once people know to play very well with the French bow, it took me less than 2 weeks to play my repertory, and I made similar experience with my own students later. So that would be a very nice thing, very interesting thing if just all double bass players, I was thinking very often about it, if everybody would just begin with this bow style and then later learn also the other one. So that would spare us of many useless discussions about those styles, which is hard to talk about if one doesn't really know how to control very well both of them. And back to my second teacher, he was definitely the most important person for my musical development, because from one side he was himself an excellent player and he has won some major prizes at the biggest bass competitions end of the 70s, and but also as pedagogically he was just so working so professionally and so well structured, and it was very easy to after spending some time on the piece with him to understand exactly the structures of the phrasings, where certain phrasing is beginning, where is its peak, and where is its ending, and to adapt the dynamics respectively. And also he was in so many other things so structured, like he explained me exactly how to play ritenutos or accelerandos to feel natural for most of the audience, and very many other small details about style, and not to go too much now into this discussing the details. And also one other thing which was for me personally very important is that he left me huge amount of autonomy in creating my own fingerings, because he noticed very quickly that I'm using a combination of standard position of the double bass and the stretched, so extended position, which was a little bit in a way nobody explained it to me, but I did it just correct way. I know it today after many years, which was a little bit matter of luck. And he just let me do it, and made interventions and advised something different only if it was not sounding well. And that was for me personally extremely important, because I was capable to develop my individuality musically and technically. And any other kind of teacher there were back then there were some other very famous players who were teaching a lot, but there were rather different types, much more copy and paste teachers who would just work with all students the same way, with same fingerings, bowings, without discussion. I think that would kill me. Artistically, that would totally kill my inspiration and capability to develop my own ideas. So Jiří Hudec, who today also learns, he teaches for quite many years already in Manchester at the Royal Northern College of Music. He was, for me, just personally, for me, the best choice I could have done. I was very happy about my time in Prague.
I am self-taught. And because I am self-taught, I have something very important that I discovered. I discovered a new technique, but I discovered that the pivot very early because I was self-taught. That's mean when I reach the C here, I don't move, I don't shift, I just pivot on my hand. And it gives me, and I discovered that it's primer something very important. This is the pivot. I pivot in my tongue.
So for the second question, my main teacher has been Venezuelan Professor Felix Petit, whom I own everything I know. He had taught me for the last 24 years and has been there like my, let's put it like that, my musical doctor, no? Fix this and fix that. I find very hard to take a kid, let's put it like that, an 11 years old kid from zero, from packing items in a supermarket cashier, and then teaching him from zero how to hold the bow, how to put the left hand on the bass, and then after 6 years bringing him, or even less, after 5 years bringing him to win an international competition in the States, an International Society of Bassists competition, and then joining one of the best orchestras of the world in Paradžik. I find it actually quite admirable. And for me, this is the ideal teaching and the ideal teacher. You know that nowadays, I include myself, we sit in a jury in the conservatory or school for music, and we take the best of those who dare to play. And then the work is done, the hard work is done, and we just put the cherry on top of the ice cream, and then we take the credits from them, which is completely unjust and unfair also, because the real teachers are those who build and not those who just decorate. Decoration is not building, it's just renovating, let's put it like that. To renovate your house, you don't need an architect. Not necessary, I mean, you can just change this and that. But to build your own house, your own temple, you need an architect. And this man does it, and he lives now in Miami, Florida, and he's still working online with many people, and even with me, I always play for him every time I play a new piece or I learn a new piece. I can't really move without his advice or his guide or his confirmation, let's put it like that. You know, he knows me since I'm a child, and he knows what my abilities are, what my limits are, what my weaknesses are, and he always fertilizes my abilities and works on my weak points. And yeah, that's the man for me. I never came across with anyone else who have raised students from zero to the top, to put it like that. And of course, I was very lucky to meet Janne Saxela and to work with him and to work with Klaus Stoll, Maestro Klaus Stoll, whom has influenced me as much as Janne Saxela. They both, of course, very different, but they accomplished themselves very well because Mr. Saxela started with Mr. Stoll, and you could tell that the information and the flow is there. And with Janne, I learned so much about technique and music, which I didn't have time enough and information enough in Venezuela. So I really have his sound ideals and technical ideas in my brain and in my ear all the time, like a reference. And Mr. Stoll, he kind of, I don't want to say he gave me wings, because I had wings, but I think maybe he gave me way more wind to go further with those wings. Let's put it like that. And still he has influenced me so much on the chamber music world with his playing and with his way to make music. And then I was also extremely blessed to work with Arnold Baez, baroque cellist, for more than 10 years. And he was the one who taught me everything I do on the period music. He teach me how to interpret the 18th century music, the 17th century music, and how to not to teach the masters, the composers. Nowadays we modern musicians, we teach the composers. And every time we play their music, we correct them. And what I learned from Baasma was that we know nothing. We all have always to wonder and take the first document as our reference point. Therefore, I'm not so enthusiastic about editions, because editions are already modified, and most of them are full of lies and rivals. So, not to say all of them. And that's why I always go to manuscripts to see and work from there. Of course, if you have this paper, the manuscript, the facsimile, and 10 people read it, 10 people will think differently. But it's different to start working on that from that point than starting working from an edition that has the instruments which the composer even didn't knew that they will ever come to this score. and it's different than start working on a music score which has been modified from the first bar to the last note. And therefore I think we should start a new wave of rediscovering the music. I have the feeling that the people and even the teachers has the opinion that everything is set, everything is written down, and the player has to do the work. Of course, if you are super gifted and super talented, you can just take the music paper and do your thing and invent and create. That's actually probably the goal. But I think editions, they really confuse us a lot. And when someone is not curious enough, or it's very how you say, when he accepts what is there and he doesn't really care if there is something more or what could be different, the music starts to suffer and the message is less powerful. So it's a very intense work, but it pays off because you are the closest possible to the so-called truth. And of course, I have worked luckily with Heinz Holliger, the conductor, oboist, and composer from Switzerland, and he was the one who introduced me to modern music. So thanks him, I knew more about modern music interpretation and the composers and the works for the double bass. So much that I had to record a complete CD of new music for double bass, written for me and in the Viennese tuning, and some written for normal tuning. And yeah, I think it's great to have different mentors specialized in their fields than just someone who knows only a little this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and in the end it's all a lacking of substance. I think that's actually my greatest lack in my life, to have worked with experts on their fields.
Yeah, my first teacher was Professor Jan Krigowski from Slovakia. He has a big talent to motivate and inspire the bass students for this instrument, which is a very important thing, I think. My second teacher was Professor Klaus Strumpf, with whom I did study for 7 years in Munich. He inspired me for the classical repertoire like Sperger, Hofmeister, Van Hal, etc. And I could learn a lot about the German and the Viennese school of bass, and also his great left-hand techniques.
Essentially, I had two teachers, very important for me, but it was in a short time. I started playing the bass, studying the bass when I was 16, and I stopped to have lessons with a teacher when I was about 21. But these two bass players, very good teacher, was in one hand was Jean-Pierre Logereau, and it was more traditional teaching. He was co-solist at the Opera of Paris, and also François Rabbath. So Jean-Pierre Logereau was at the conservatory, so I visit him to have a lesson each week, of course, and I follow all the classical courses. And in the other hand, about 3-4 times a year, I visit François Rabbath to have a big lesson, and it was very impactful for me. But both at the same time was very good compliment for me. And after that, about age of 21, I start to practice, work, experiment, all by myself. So it's quite a long time ago now, as I am 57. And about the impact, I would say, especially with François, it was the idea of economy of energy, using all the weight of your arms, of your shoulder, everything. And also, of course, the role very important of the wrist and the flexibility of the wrist. Many things to say in a few seconds or in a few minutes. Maybe we have another occasion with extended time.
My first double bass teacher was the Hungarian bassist Zoltán Kovács. He was very much part of the old Hungarian tradition, and I have to credit him with changing my life. I was an accidental bass player. He just told me one day that I was coming for bass lesson, and I went. And that was a transformative moment. But what did he really teach me? He taught me not just to play the bass, he taught me the true value of hard work and dedication. I remember that his view was that the very first stage in learning anything was to memorize it. If you hadn't memorized it, you didn't really know it. And early on in my time with him, he always had the same words for me when I walked through the door. He'd ask me, "Leon, have you practiced?" And naively I said in the beginning, "Yes, Zoltan." And he'd say, "Would you play?" And the first mistake I made, he'd stop and say, "Look, I thought you said you'd practiced. Don't come back till you've done some proper work." And he'd show me the door. And it was at that point I realized what it meant to work properly. And throughout my life, I've always wondered when I play, was that good enough for Zoltan? What would Zoltan think? Zoltan was a man of unimpeachable musical and personal integrity. And that, in essence, transformed my life. I have Zoltan to thank for every note that I've played.
I could not be where I am today. I could not have had the career that I did without the influences of so many people. My teachers to begin with, I studied with Yuda Demenstein when I was a very young boy. He came from Russia with my grandfather, both of whom studied at the St. Petersburg Conservatory of Music. And their approach to music was musicality and feeling first, technique second. And in the 90s, I went to St. Petersburg and I gave a master class at the conservatory, and to my amazement, the way of teaching the bass did 180, because there, what I experienced was technique first and musicality second. However, I think that they've already come 180 back to the original approach. I've always, I remember studying with Yuda Demenstein, who gave me daily lessons / practice sessions. Even with some humble, boring etudes or exercises, he would insist that I play them with feeling. And that stayed with me always. I then studied with Herman Reinshagen, who is an amazing teacher. He's played with the New York Philharmonic, and then he retired in Los Angeles and taught a lot of bass players there, including a lot of jazzers. Very often when I went for my lesson, I would enter the house, and exiting the house of Herman Reinshagen was none other than Charlie Mingus. And he was many of great jazz bass players who studied with this great teacher. Herman Reinshagen had transcribed piles, and I mean piles, of music that he thought would really sound well on the double bass. And so for all my lessons, every time I worked with him every week, and for every week, each lesson I had to play at least 1 or 2 new pieces. And this was an amazing influence. It was having to learn so much repertoire really taught me a lot. And then after studying with Herman Reinshagen, I studied with Stuart Sankey, who introduced me to another world of great masterpieces. And it was with Sankey that I learned the Bach da Gamba sonatas and the Schubert Arpeggione sonata, which I performed both pieces. I played a Bach sonata and the Schubert in my town hall debut in 1962. And while studying with Sankey at the Juilliard School, I also studied with Leonard Rose, who insisted that I play French bow. Now, Leonard Rose was a cellist, and so he felt uncomfortable when I was using German bow. And he focused my attention on the bow in ways that I hadn't before, except that I must say that having grown up in Los Angeles, the same town in which Jascha Heifetz, the great violinist, lived, I had the opportunity to see firsthand Heifetz's bowing, and I was more fascinated by the way he moved his bow across the strings than the way he moved his fingers. And my eyes were glued to that every time he performed. And what amazed me was that he played closer to the bridge than I had seen other violinists play. And also he seemed to use much less bow and a very slow bow. So I thought, wow, I think I'll do that on the bass. And that held me in great stead much later on, because when I had to perform in large concert halls or with orchestras, I was always able to project well, because by playing closer to the bridge, the bass sounded more brilliant and would really fill the hall with sound all the way to the back row. And I could not have accomplished that by playing in the middle between the bridge and the fingerboard throughout the concert. So I'm really grateful to Heifetz and grateful to Rhodes. Also, I studied with another cellist who, while studying with Hermann Reinshagen at the University of Southern California, his name was Gabor Raito. And this man, what a passionate musician and what an inspiration. And what he did is he suggested that I open my hand, and instead of using the Simondl method of only one whole tone between the first and fourth fingers, why not 1.5? So I would do, for him, 1, 2, 4, or 1, 3, 4. So I'd spread the hand. I wouldn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, but 1, 2, 4, and 1, 3, 4. And I discovered, well, that's what electric bass players are doing. So I revamped all my left-hand technique and redid all my scales and everything using the electric bass fingering or the cello fingering. Then, of course, you know, in addition to instrumental teachers that work specifically with me on technique, I was greatly influenced by singers. Jenny Terrell gave me lessons, and she taught me how to shift, because she said when you're shifting, you should shift like a singer. You have to think of the next note, and you have to sing with it. And you know, she taught me about phrasing. She was an amazing singer. She sang with Metropolitan Opera, as did some other male singers with the Met, like Justino Diaz, with whom I often performed the Mozart Prequesta Bellamano. I loved the sound of his voice, and I would try to imitate it just as I did as a child, listening to Igor Gorin on the radio. He would sing a song, and then I would go and try to imitate him on the bass and try to play it in the same register he sang, which really is pretty much the singing register of the bass. I was also influenced by a lot of jazz musicians. I mentioned already Charlie Mingus, but Paul Chambers, incredible musician, and I'll never forget going to his funeral with my friend Ornette Coleman. Paul Chambers, I think, had one of the greatest influences on all bass players in terms not only of technique, but of just musicality. And also Richard Davis, who was classically trained. He and I used to do jam sessions together in New York, and we used to play all kinds of Baroque pieces and, you know, classical literature. And he said, well, why don't you take some of these Baroque pieces we're playing, you play the Baroque piece straight, and I'll improvise a continuo part in a jazz style. And so we had a lot of fun doing that. We even did it on television one time on CBS Sunday Morning. And it was an exciting, no, it wasn't CBS Sunday Morning, it was Camera 3. Yeah, and I think it's actually on YouTube if you want to see it. I think we played the Echo Sonata. It's been a long time since I did that, so I don't remember exactly all the details about it. Then there were other amazing jazz singers like Sarah Vaughan and Billie Holiday. I learned not only Baroque ornamentation from them, like Mahalia Jackson too. Her ornamentation was absolutely 100% Baroque. But also I learned about rhythm for them. For instance, Billie Holiday, she would just float above the band, and I thought, why can't I do that in classical music? I spoke to some of her band members, and I said, what was it like playing with Billie Holiday? It was a nightmare because we couldn't listen to her. We just kept the store, and we just played straight. And then she would float above us and land at important spots with us, so we knew we were playing together. But I thought that's an amazing approach, but the approach required an ability to think ahead in time and to feel relaxed with time, feel relaxed with duration. And I found that same kind of ability in some classical musicians of the past, like Wanda Landowska. If you listen to her recordings on the harpsichord, or Pablo Casals on the cello, you'll hear these people playing in a way that is totally captivating. And a lot of people criticized them because they said they were too free, but in fact they weren't. I even had a metronome made for me, especially so that it would beat slower than 40 beats per minute. In fact, it would go down 1 beat per minute. And I tested both Landowska and Casals to see, with all the freedom that they did, was there an accurate beat in 1 minute? And guess what I discovered? They loved to play between 9 and 17 beats per minute, and they were dead on. I couldn't believe it. But these musicians, like Billie Holiday, had this ability to think into the future and plan it so that they could stretch and do all kinds of things between important signposts along the way. I've tried to emulate that as much as I could, and had a tremendous influence on me. As a student at the Juilliard, I was living in New York, of course, and I had the great opportunity to go and listen to Misha Elman practice the violin. And what I realized in listening to him play was this man was totally in love with his sound and was unabashed about it. And I thought, wow, I feel the same way about the bass. And so I started focusing on that. And I said, everything I do, the sound is the most important thing. I have to love it. If I don't love the sound that I'm making in any given piece, I'm not playing the piece the way I want to play it. So that just gives you an example of some of the many musicians who had a tremendous influence on my life.
So I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, there's an easy way for you to let us know. Just click that like button, leave us a comment, share your thoughts, and it will encourage us to do more like this. I need to thank everybody who's contributed to this video. There's some incredible bass players that have been involved. So we thank you for your time, and we thank you for watching at home. Keep practicing hard, and we'll see you next time.